Imagine you run a small business. You've poured your blood, your sweat, your tears into building this company from the ground up.
Yeah, fighting for every single client.
Exactly. And you have this trusted employee, right? Someone who regularly enters all your customer information into the system. Well, one afternoon, they're running an errand, and they park their car outside a coffee shop.
Oh, I know where this is going.
Right. They accidentally leave their work laptop sitting right there on the passenger seat. I mean, they are gone for maybe 10 minutes max.
If that's all it takes, yeah.
10 minutes. And when they come back, the car window is smashed. The laptop is just gone. And just like that, your entire customer database, so names, addresses, payment histories, internal notes, it is all out in the wild.
It is, it's the absolute definition of a business nightmare. You aren't just looking at a stolen piece of hardware.
Right, a laptop is replaceable.
Exactly. You are looking at a crisis that could completely destroy the loyal customer base you spent years and years building. Not to mention, the potential legal liabilities that follow.
So what do you do? I mean, how do you handle this? Do you just fire the employee on the spot? And more importantly, how do you save your business from the fallout?
It's a huge question.
It is. And the terrifying thing is, this isn't just some, theoretical nightmare scenario designed for a textbook. It is a daily reality in the business world. So, welcome to Managing the Future.
Yes, welcome.
This is a special deep dive designed for the future business leaders at the Dr. Sam Pack College of Business at Tarleton State University. And really, for anyone out there trying to navigate the incredibly complex world of business operations. Today, our focus is Module 5, which is cybersecurity, and we're drawing strictly from the Text Connect Master Management Information Systems by Richard Tedmon and Casey Wilhelm.
It is an incredibly critical topic. But before we get into the trenches of cybersecurity and how to prevent that stolen laptop scenario from just destroying a company, we really should bridge the gap from our last discussion.
Oh, definitely.
Because the data we are learning to protect today is the exact same data we just learned how to build and manage.
Let's unpack that connection.
Yeah.
Because in Module 4, we took a really close look at spreadsheets.
We did, yeah.
We talked about how foundational they are for organizing business data into rows and columns, using built-in formulas like AutoSum for budgets.
Right, or the average function for calculating performance metrics.
Exactly. And the payment function for figuring out loan structures. We also spent a lot of time on formatting, specifically converting those complex files into comma-separated format, or CSV files.
And that CSV format, well, it's a double-edged sword, really.
How so?
Well, CSV files save only the raw cell values. So without the styles, the macros, or the complex formatting. And that means they can be opened in virtually any spreadsheet or database program. Microsoft Excel, Google Sheets, Apple Numbers, whatever.
Right, which makes it super easy to share.
Exactly. It allows for seamless data sharing across different platforms, which is just fantastic for operational efficiency.
Yeah. But, and here's where it gets really interesting, all that incredibly valuable data we just learned how to organize, the independent bookstore's inventory, the financial budgets, the customer records, it is highly sensitive.
Very sensitive.
So if you have a CSV file full of customer payment histories and it gets intercepted, well, it is immediately perfectly readable by anyone who opens it.
Yeah, there are no barriers at all.
None. Your business is suddenly in serious jeopardy. So today is all about building a fortress around that data. We are going to learn how to keep it safe, but specifically from a management perspective.
And that management perspective is key. This is a skill set every single business professional needs today. It's not just for the IT department in the basement anymore.
Absolutely not. But before we jump into building that digital fortress, just a quick reminder to you, our listener. If you are enjoying this series and finding these deep dives helpful for your coursework or your career, please take a second to like, subscribe, follow, and share this with your classmates.
Yeah, share it around.
And be sure to leave a comment. We love seeing your thoughts, and it really helps build this community of future business leaders.
So let's dive in. The cybersecurity landscape is full of terms that people, especially, people in the media, they tend to use interchangeably.
Like buzzwords.
Exactly. But according to Tedmon and Wilhelm, they have very specific meanings. And a manager really must understand the distinctions to respond effectively. We're talking about threats, vulnerabilities, exploits, and breaches.
Precision in language dictates precision in business response, right?
I love that, yes.
Let's start with a threat. So the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, they define a cybersecurity threat as an event or condition that has the potential for causing asset loss.
Right, and that could be information, software, or hardware.
And the undesirable consequences from that loss. So it's basically the pure potential for harm.
Yes, exactly. And moving from the potential to an internal weakness, we have the vulnerability. A vulnerability is a specific weakness or flaw in your system's security procedures.
So like a flaw in the design or implementation.
Yeah, design, implementation, or just its internal controls. It's a flaw that could be compromised, either accidentally or intentionally.
Give me an example of how that happens in a business.
Well, small businesses often have vulnerabilities simply because they don't have large IT staffs to configure things perfectly. An employee might accidentally change a network setting or just leave a default password in place.
Oh, like leaving the password as admin123.
Exactly. But large corporations, on the other hand, they might introduce vulnerabilities when they install a massive new operating system or update current software, exposing unforeseen weaknesses in the integration.
So the threat is the danger out there in the world,
Yeah.
and the vulnerability is our own internal weakness. Then we get to the third term, the exploit.
Right. An exploit is the specific mechanism a hacker uses to take advantage of that vulnerability.
Okay, what does that mean mechanically?
We're talking about specific code command sequences or open source exploit kits. It's the actual tool used to force the lock, allowing an intruder to remotely access a network and gain unwarranted privileges to, move deeper into the organization's systems.
And when they successfully force that lock with the exploit, that is the breach.
You got it. A breach occurs when the hacker actually gains unauthorized access to the organization's systems, its data, its information. This is the intrusion event that leads to system damage, data loss, and network downtime.
Okay, let me try a real-world analogy to map this all out.
Go for it.
Let's say you won a physical brick-and-mortar shoe store.
Okay.
A vulnerability is the fact that you left the back door of your store unlocked after taking out the trash. The threat is the known burglar who operates in your neighborhood.
Right, the danger out there.
Exactly. So the exploit is the burglar walking up to your store and physically turning the knob of that specific unlocked door. And the breach is them stepping over the threshold, walking in, and actually stealing the cash register.
That analogy maps perfectly. It really does. And the reason business managers must understand these distinctions is because you cannot fix a threat.
You can't arrest the burglar before he does anything?
Right. The neighborhood burglar exists whether you like it or not. The hacker syndicate exists in another country regardless of your IT budget. But you can fix a vulnerability.
You can lock the back door.
Exactly. You lock the back door before an exploit occurs and turns into a breach.
So what does this look like at a massive corporate scale? Because the text mentions a huge breach from 2018 regarding Under Armour.
Oh yeah, the Under Armour MyFitnessPal app breach. It's a fascinating case study in scale. In late February 2018, hackers breached the app, compromising usernames, email addresses, and passwords from approximately 150 million users.
Wow, 150 million.
Yeah. And the company discovered the intrusion in late March and disclosed it publicly in under a week.
Let's break down the mechanics of that. 150 million users is just a staggering number. I mean, even if the data didn't include social security numbers or credit cards, exposing that many email and password combinations is a massive vulnerability.
It is, because people reuse passwords across their banking and email accounts constantly.
Right. So the business fallout for Under Armour must have been immense.
The fallout was significant. Their stock dropped in the immediate aftermath, and they had to mobilize a massive crisis response.
Yeah.
Notifying users, forcing password resets, working with law enforcement and data security firms.
Just a logistical nightmare.
A textbook example of a vulnerability being exploited at a massive scale. And with stakes that high, someone has to be steering the ship. This introduces a critical executive role, the Chief Information Security Officer or the CISO.
Okay, I was looking at the CISO's required background in the text, and it's really telling. CISOs require, or at least it's strongly preferred, that they have a master's degree, specifically a Master of Business Administration, an MBA, or a master's in cybersecurity.
Yeah, the MBA part is key.
Right. Since the CISO needs an MBA, does that mean cybersecurity is now viewed fundamentally as a business management issue rather than a pure IT coding issue?
100%. The days of security being just the IT department's problem are totally over. A common job responsibility of a CISO is to ensure that security aligns with the strategic direction of the business.
So they aren't just sitting in a dark room writing code.
Not at all. They have to examine and report information security risks to meet compliance and regulatory requirements, and they oversee relationships with security-related vendors.
That translation piece seems crucial. I mean, imagine a CISO in a boardroom trying to get budget approval for $1 million firewall upgrade.
Good luck if they talk like an engineer.
Right. If they just talk about packet sniffing and port protocols, the chief financial officer is going to glaze over and deny the budget immediately. The CISO has to translate those technical exploits into business risk.
Exactly, explaining how the firewall prevents a breach that would otherwise halt supply chain operations for a week.
Which would cost, $10 million in lost revenue.
Oh. Yes. And that is a huge takeaway for our business majors listening right now. You don't necessarily have to write the code to be a leader in cybersecurity. You have to understand the business impact.
You need to understand how digital vulnerabilities affect the bottom line.
Precisely. But, even with a brilliant CISO and an unlimited budget, the biggest vulnerability in any organization is often the human element.
Which brings us to the psychology of cybersecurity. Because we can build the strongest digital walls in the world, but they are completely useless if an employee just willingly opens the front door and hands over the keys.
It happens every day.
And that is the core of social engineering. It's the psychological manipulation of people so that they willingly give up confidential information like bank details or passwords.
The human element is consistently the weakest link. Hackers know it's often much easier to trick a human than it is to break through a complex cryptographic firewall.
So how do they do it?
The text highlights impersonation and baiting as two primary tactics. So, impersonation is exactly what it sounds like. A hacker plays the role of someone the target knows or trusts.
Like getting an email from your boss.
Yeah, these attacks often come in the form of emails from supposed trusted sources, like a boss or a vendor, that look perfectly legitimate, but contain malicious links.
I want to dig into that because the sophistication is terrifying now. This isn't the old days of poorly spelled emails from a prince asking for a wire transfer.
No. Those are largely a thing of the past.
We are talking about highly targeted spear phishing. A hacker might scrape a company's LinkedIn page, find out exactly who the new entry-level accounts payable clerk is, and send an email that perfectly mimics the CEO's writing style.
Asking them to urgently process an attached CSV file of vendor payments.
Right, and they are new. They want to please the CEO, so they do it.
And if the employee opens that file, the malware executes. Now, baiting scenarios operate on a similar manipulation of human nature, but they usually target curiosity or greed rather than authority.
Like a free offer.
Yeah, an individual is encouraged to download a free movie, a song, or maybe enter a giveaway. The offer seems too good to be true. And once the user clicks the link, they are prompted to provide personal information or download a payload.
So social engineers exploit trust and a fundamental lack of knowledge about what information should be kept private.
Exactly, which connects directly to the concept of insider threats.
Let's talk about that. What makes someone an insider threat?
An insider threat is any individual that has, or had in the past, knowledge of or authorized access to an organization's IT resources.
So it's not just the people working in the office right now?
No, it's a broad category. It isn't just current employees. It includes people who have a physical badge to access the building, so repair workers, janitorial staff, or vendors who develop products for the organization.
Anyone with the inside scoop?
Basically, anyone with the inside knowledge about the organization's cost structures, pricing, customer agreements, goals, and strategies.
And it's crucial to point out here that these threats aren't always malicious, right?
Right. Insider threats can certainly be intentional, where a disgruntled employee willfully attacks systems or steals proprietary data before leaving for a competitor. That happens.
But they can also be unintentional.
Very often, yes. It could be an employee erasing a critical database by mistake, or falling for one of those sophisticated social engineering attacks we just talked about.
There are also collusive threats, right?
Yeah, involving multiple people inside the company. And third-party threats, where outside contractors with system access unintentionally compromise security through sloppy practices.
Let's apply this to a concrete scenario from the text because it perfectly highlights how digital security bleeds directly into physical security.
I like this example, yeah.
Imagine you own a small business that offers an in-home service, like landscaping or house cleaning.
Right. In that kind of business, you hold a massive amount of incredibly sensitive data. You don't just have their credit card numbers for billing.
You have their life schedule.
You have detailed data on when your customers are away at work, their vacation schedules, and explicit instructions on how to access their homes. Alarm codes, hidden key locations, gate passwords.
So if a social engineer targets your business, they might call up one of your cleaning employees, impersonate a property manager or maybe a software vendor, and trick them into giving up the scheduling database.
And that is a massive physical security risk for your clients.
Right. It's not just a digital breach. You've literally handed a syndicate of burglars a map, a schedule, and the keys to hundreds of homes.
Which is exactly why business managers must foster a very specific type of company culture. You have to build a culture of verification.
What does that mean in practice?
It means employees should be encouraged to verify attachments and callers constantly. If an employee feels something is even slightly wrong, they should feel completely empowered to hang up the phone and call the person back in a known, verified number.
Even if it's supposedly the CEO calling.
Especially then. No employee should ever fear being reprimanded for slowing down a process to insist on verification before divulging information.
I hear that, and building that culture is great, but let me push back a little on the management reality here.
Sure, go ahead.
It's easy to say, educate your employees. But if a hacker sends that perfectly forged email from the CEO demanding a wire transfer, is it really fair to blame the entry-level employee for falling for it?
It's tough, yeah.
And going back to our hook at the start of the show, the stolen laptop in the car, how does a manager handle that scenario without completely destroying team morale or creating a culture of fear?
That is the ultimate management challenge, truly. The responses obviously range from termination to a serious reprimand, depending on the severity of the negligence. But from a broader perspective, it highlights the need for managers to foresee and prevent accidental breaches systemically.
So it's on the manager to build a safety net.
Exactly. You cannot just blame the entry-level employee if you, as the manager, haven't implemented systems that prevent a single human error from becoming a catastrophic failure.
Education is just the baseline.
Right. Education is the baseline, but you need technical defenses so that one mistake doesn't sink the entire ship. If that stolen laptop had proper endpoint encryption, well, a smashed window was just a hardware loss, not a massive data breach.
That is a perfect pivot into the technical side of things. Because human error isn't the only way in. Even if your employees are perfectly trained and they never fall for an email scam, hackers have built an entire arsenal of automated tools that don't need a human to open the door.
They really have.
The text outlines a whole host of technical malware and advanced attacks. Let's break these down, starting with bots and ransomware.
So bots are interesting because they can actually be used positively. Search engines use bots to index the web.
Right, Google bots.
But malicious bots are malware used to gain total control over a computer. They self-propagate malware that infects the host and then connects back to a central server.
Turning the computer into a zombie, basically.
Basically, yeah. It turns the infected computer into part of a botnet that can be used to launch massive coordinated attacks without the owner's knowledge.
And ransomware. This feels like the most common threat we see in the headlines these days.
It's rampant. Ransomware is malware that makes a computer's data inaccessible until a ransom is paid. Mechanics-wise, it encrypts the victim's data files using complex cryptographic keys.
So you go to open your file and it's just garbage.
Right. The victim goes to open their spreadsheet, and instead of data, they get a message offering to decrypt the files if they pay a ransom. This payment is almost always demanded via a difficult-to-trace method, like Bitcoin or prepaid cards.
And if a business caves and pays the Bitcoin, do they actually get their data back?
Not always. I mean, you're dealing with criminals. The perpetrator may or may not send the decrypting code.
Yeah.
And the threat has evolved recently, too.
That's so.
A newer variation, often called double extortion ransomware, not only encrypts the files, but steals them first.
Oh, wow. So they have your data on their servers now.
Yes. The hacker threatens to release the victim's sensitive personal or corporate files publicly on the dark web unless the ransom is paid.
So even if you have backups and don't need their decryption key, they hold your reputation hostage.
Exactly. It's a brutal position for a business leader.
Okay, next up on the technical list, rootkits and keyloggers.
A rootkit is incredibly stealthy. It hides deep within the operating system and is triggered every single time the computer is rebooted, often before the antivirus software even loads up.
So it's basically invisible.
Very hard to detect. It allows a remote user to install rogue files and take complete administrative control of the computer by creating a backdoor that bypasses standard security altogether. They can delete files, change settings, and monitor activity completely invisibly.
And how do they leverage that access? I mean, that's where a keylogger comes in, right?
Yes. A keylogger is a form of surveillance technology. It literally records every single keystroke typed on a keyboard.
So everything you type,
Everything. This means it passively captures passwords, login credentials, credit card numbers, and all the confidential information a user types. And it's important to note, these aren't just for desktop computers. Keyloggers can be deployed on smartphones and tablets as well.
Okay, let's clarify viruses versus Trojans, because I feel like pop culture uses these terms interchangeably for any computer infection, but they operate very differently according to the text.
They operate fundamentally differently. A computer virus is malicious software created using computer code that infects a host. The key condition here, and the text uses a great biological analogy, is that it acts like a biological flu virus.
So it spreads from person to person or computer to computer.
Exactly. It is specifically designed to spread and has the ability to replicate itself across networks. But unlike a biological virus, a computer virus must be run or executed to attack and do damage.
It can't just happen on its own.
No, it cannot reproduce without a host action, like a user actively opening an infected file or executing a macro in a document. Once run, it replicates and can destroy programs or alter operations.
And how is the Trojan horse different in its mechanics?
Well, a Trojan horse is a program that appears completely legitimate, but executes an unwanted activity when activated.
Like the wooden horse from Greek mythology.
Exactly. It's named after it because it relies on deception. A user thinks they are downloading a legitimate software update or a PDF invoice. Hackers use them to establish backdoors, find passwords, or bypass firewalls.
But do they replicate?
That's the major mechanical difference. Trojans do not replicate themselves the way viruses do. They rely on users actively downloading and installing them, thinking they are something else.
Got it. So viruses replicate to spread. Trojans are disguised decoys that don't replicate, but they open the gates from the inside.
Perfect summary.
Next on the technical list are mid-min and MITMO attacks.
Right. Mid-M stands for man in the middle. This occurs when an attacker secretly positions themselves in a conversation or data transfer between a user and an application.
Give me a real-world scenario of that.
Okay, imagine a user sitting in a coffee shop using public Wi-Fi to access their company's server. The attacker intercepts that Wi-Fi signal. Their goal is to eavesdrop or impersonate one of the parties to steal personal information. Login credentials, account details, credit card numbers.
And MITMO.
MITMO is the exact same concept, but it stands for man in the mobile, meaning the attack specifically targets cellular networks or mobile devices, allowing the perpetrator to monitor activity on the smartphone.
Let me ask for a clarification here, connecting back to our spreadsheet discussion from earlier. If two executives are emailing a highly sensitive Excel budget back and forth, and an attacker executes a man-in-the-middle attack, does that just mean the hacker is silently reading the numbers as they pass by, or is there a bigger threat?
The passive eavesdropping is bad enough, obviously, but a true man-in-the-middle attack allows for active manipulation.
They can change the data.
Yes. Because the attacker has intercepted the communication flow, they can alter the data in transit. They could theoretically intercept the email, change the budget numbers, or alter the routing numbers for a wire transfer inside that spreadsheet, and then pass it along to the recipient.
That is terrifying.
It is. The recipient thinks they are getting legitimate data from their colleague, completely unaware that the integrity of the data was destroyed in transit.
Wow, that is a huge risk for a business relying on accurate financials. Okay, the last two specific technical threats. Kerberoasting and SQL injection. Let's start with Kerberoasting.
Kerberoasting is a specific type of brute force cyber attack.
And a brute force attack is just guessing passwords, right?
Right. A standard brute force attack is where a hacker uses automated software to simply guess usernames and passwords over and over, millions of times a second, until they get into a private system.
Okay, so how is Kerberoasting different?
Kerberoasting specifically targets the Kerberos Authentication protocol, which is the system used within Windows Active Directory environments.
Let's translate that jargon for a second for everyone. Windows Active Directory is basically the master guest list for a company's network, right?
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
It manages who has access to what printers, what files, and what servers.
Exactly. It's the central authority for permissions. So an attacker uses Kerberoasting to extract service account credentials from that directory and crack them offline.
So how do you stop that?
To prevent it, businesses need incredibly strong, complex passwords, regular password rotation policies, and they need to implement the principle of least privilege.
Which means?
Meaning, users only get the exact network permissions they need to do their job, and absolutely nothing more.
That makes sense. Okay, and SQL injection, how does that work mechanically?
SQL injection attacks are deployed via the web, and they target databases. SQL stands for Structured Query Language. which is how websites talk to their underlying databases.
Right.
An injection attack is designed to exploit security weaknesses in the website's input fields. Imagine a standard login box on a website asking for a username.
Okay, pretty standard.
Instead of typing a normal name like John Smith, the attacker types a specific string of SQL database code into the box.
And because the website isn't secured properly, it just passes that malicious code directly to the database.
Exactly. The database reads the code, gets confused, and essentially executes a command it shouldn't.
Like what?
It might translate to ignore the password and just let me in, or dump every credit card number in this table to my screen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because of this interference, attackers view restricted data they normally wouldn't have permission to access. If a manager knows that SQL injections specifically target databases, they understand that they need to invest in developer education so their coders write secure queries that sanitize inputs.
And invest in penetration testing to find those vulnerabilities before hackers do.
Precisely. Understanding the specific nature of the threat dictates how you allocate your defensive budget.
And the text provides a chilling historical scenario of how severe these technical attacks can be when they're deployed against massive targets.
The Russian grid hacking of 2017.
Yes. In 2017, security researchers sounded a massive alarm that Russian hackers were systematically infiltrating and probing United States power companies.
It was a huge deal.
There was hard evidence that these state-sponsored bad actors had gained direct access to an American utilities control systems.
We really need to pause and appreciate the scale of that. This perfectly highlights the difference between a minor business annoyance and a lethal threat.
Absolutely.
If a hacker gets an adware infection on my personal laptop, well, it's frustrating. I have to spend a Saturday wiping my hard drive.
Sure, annoying but manageable.
Right. But if a state-sponsored hacker uses advanced malware to infiltrate industrial utility control systems, which are often called SCADA systems, they aren't just stealing data.
They could shut off the power.
They could theoretically shut off power to hospitals, disable traffic lights, or command turbines to spin until they physically destroy themselves. It elevates cybersecurity from data protection to the defense of critical, life-sustaining infrastructure.
And that transition from annoyance to catastrophic failure is exactly why we need robust, systemic frameworks for defense. Which brings us to the core goals of cybersecurity. How do we build a structural framework to prevent this?
It all revolves around something called the CIA Triad, and understanding the physical states of data.
The CIA Triad. I'm assuming, given the context, this has nothing to do with international espionage and the Central Intelligence Agency.
Correct. No spies here. In management information systems, the CIA Triad stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These are the three fundamental, non-negotiable pillars of keeping data safe.
Let's look at each one, starting with confidentiality. This one feels the most intuitive.
It is. Confidentiality covers privacy. It's about avoiding the unauthorized disclosure of information. It ensures that essential information gets to the right people while actively preventing it from reaching the wrong people.
And what tools do we use for that?
The tools used to maintain confidentiality include data encryption, strict access controls, robust user authentication, and even physical security.
Like putting servers behind biometric locked doors.
Exactly. Okay, pillar 2, integrity.
Right.
Integrity is about ensuring the data is real, accurate, and safeguarded from unauthorized user modification. It ensures data isn't altered during transmission, like we discussed with the man-in-the-middle attack.
So how do you guarantee integrity?
Tools for maintaining integrity include routine data backups, checksums, which are mathematical values used to verify file integrity, data correction codes, strict file permissions, and version controls. Organizations must have systems in place to immediately detect any changes caused by human error or malicious alteration.
And the third pillar, availability.
Availability means ensuring that data and system infrastructure are actually there and functioning when you need them. A perfectly secure system is completely useless if authorized users can't access it to do their jobs.
Right, if you lock it down so tight no one can use it.
Exactly. This means maintaining hardware, ensuring a correctly functioning operating system with current upgrades to maximize speed, and providing adequate communication bandwidth to prevent network bottlenecks.
What are the mitigation strategies there?
Well, they include using RAIDs, which are redundant arrays of independent disks that ensure data survives a hard drive failure, and high availability clusters, which are groups of networked computers that seamlessly take over for one another to minimize downtime if a server crashes.
And tying into all three pillars of this triad is the concept of authentication.
Yes, authentication is the gateway. It's the process organizations use to verify an individual's or entity's identity, definitively establishing the origin of information. It prevents unauthorized access while ensuring that those who do need access receive it smoothly.
So when a business manager asks their IT team, is our data secure? They can't just accept a simple yes. They have to evaluate that security against all three pillars. Is it confidential? Is its integrity intact? Is it available?
Right, it has to meet all three.
But the text points out another layer of complexity. They also have to evaluate security across the three states of data. What are the data states?
Data isn't just sitting statically in one place. It exists in three distinct states, and it requires different protection in each state: at rest, in transit, and in process.
Let's start with data at rest.
This is data stored permanently on computer hard drives, massive server farms, internal storage hardware, or in cloud storage repositories. It includes archival files, historical customer records, and data that is rarely changed or subject to regular, but not constant, updates.
And how do we protect that?
Because it's stationary, organizations protect it using heavy data encryption at the drive level and hierarchical password protection,
Then we have data in transit.
also called data in motion. This is data actively passing through networks, whether that's moving across the global internet over cellular networks through local Wi-Fi, or even located temporarily in a device's RAM before being saved.
So it's vulnerable while it's moving.
Very. It must be protected as it travels to prevent interception. Examples include passwords being sent to a server for verification, usernames, two-factor identification codes, and application-specific data displayed on a screen, but not yet committed to permanent storage on the device.
And finally, the most complex one, data in process.
Yes, this is data that is actively being manipulated, processed, and calculated right now. It is not stored in permanent memory. It's held temporarily in volatile storage areas like random access memory, or RAM.
Just to translate that for our listeners, RAM is the computer's short-term working memory. When you turn off a computer, anything in RAM disappears, which is why it's called volatile.
Exactly. So data in process includes things like active account balances being calculated during a transaction or a shopping cart total updating in real time. Almost every smartphone app you use involves massive amounts of data in process.
Let me use a banking analogy to make sure I grasp how the CIA Triad and the data states intersect practically.
Let's hear it.
Okay, confidentiality is ensuring only I can log in and see my specific bank balance. Integrity means the bank's database can't arbitrarily change my $100 deposit into a $10 deposit due to a glitch.
Right.
Availability means the ATM actually dispenses cash and successfully contacts the banking network when I request a withdrawal. But how do we protect the data when it's in process? I mean, literally being calculated in the RAM of the banking server during the transaction. That seems incredibly vulnerable to interruption.
It is highly vulnerable. Any interruption, a power failure, a software crash, a network spike can corrupt that data in process. But let's look at a concrete business scenario from the text to illustrate this. Electronic data interchange, or EDI.
How does that work?
Massive businesses, like automotive manufacturers or global retailers, use EDI to transmit millions of data points, supply orders, and financial payments from one company to another instantaneously.
So there's a lot of data moving and processing at once.
Huge amounts.
Yeah.
Servers are processing information and storing massive amounts of data in real-time RAM. If that process is interrupted or the technology fails mid-calculation, you have a massive availability and in-process data failure. The system doesn't know if a $1 million payment was completed or not.
So what does a business do to manage that specific risk?
They must engineer an Information Technology Disaster Recovery Plan, an ITDRP. This plan is developed alongside a broader business continuity plan.
So they prepare for the worst.
Exactly. During a business impact analysis phase, management sets strict priorities and recovery time objectives. They map out technology recovery strategies that dictate exactly how to restore hardware, applications, and data fast enough to meet business needs, ensuring that corrupted in-process data can be rolled back to its last known good state without halting operations.
Okay, so we've covered the mechanics of the threats and the structural goals for securing the data. Now we need to look at how businesses actually make decisions about this, because none of this operates in a vacuum. There are legal frameworks governing how businesses handle cybersecurity and profound financial realities regarding risk management.
Absolutely. The regulatory environment is complex. The United States has a variety of federal cybersecurity laws, and individual states have varied, sometimes overlapping requirements. Let's look at the federal level first.
Okay.
There's IPA, The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. This strictly mandates data security and privacy protocols for patient healthcare information.
Right, very common in healthcare.
Then there's the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, or GLBA. This requires financial institutions to explicitly explain their information sharing practices to customers and implement robust safeguards for sensitive financial data.
And what about emails and communications?
That falls under the Stored Communications Act, which is Title II of the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, or ECPA. This law makes the intentional unauthorized access of a facility providing electronic communication services, like an email provider or cloud host, a federal criminal violation.
And the states are increasingly stepping in where federal law leaves gaps, right?
Yes. According to the National Conference on State Legislatures, state governments are making cybersecurity a significantly higher legislative priority as threats evolve.
What are the states focusing on?
Key areas of state legislation include restructuring state government IT for increased security, mandating security standards for Internet of Things or IoT-connected devices, aggressively addressing cyber threats in local elections, and providing localized security mandates for utilities and critical infrastructures.
We also have to look globally because international laws heavily impact U.S. companies operating online.
The most prominent example is the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. The sweeping European law regulates how companies must protect the personal data of citizens of the European Union.
And why does that matter for a company in Texas?
The key here is jurisdiction. If a U.S.-based company, even a small online retailer, does business with EU citizens or tracks their data, they must comply with GDPR standards. And those standards are incredibly strict regarding user consent, data privacy, and mandatory breach notification timelines.
So as a business manager, staring at all these complex laws, federal mandates, and terrifying technical threats, you would assume the mandate is just to implement every single security measure available. Buy all the firewalls, hire all the consultants, encrypt everything.
You would assume that, yeah. But here is where we hit the hard financial reality of business management. Securing IT systems costs money, massive amounts of money.
Budgets aren't infinite.
Right. If organizations had unlimited funds, securing infrastructure would be straightforward. But corporate resources are inherently limited. Therefore, cybersecurity fundamentally involves calculating financial risks and determining if the cost to protect against a threat is justified.
And this introduces a critical business concept, probable maximum loss.
Yes. Probable maximum loss, or PML, is a financial calculation that estimates the absolute highest value a specific threat or breach might cost an organization in a worst-case scenario.
So it's finding the ceiling of the potential damage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Businesses use PML as the foundation to conduct a cybersecurity risk analysis. This analysis balances the financial costs of implementing countermeasures against the financial benefits of avoiding a breach. It identifies the value of the digital assets, the potential loss, and how best to respond.
The text outlines a multi-step process for this risk analysis. How does a company actually execute this? Do they just guess the value of their data?
Oh no, it's a rigorous process.
Right.
First, the organization must assign actual dollar values to their information assets. The data, the hardware, the proprietary software.
It's a price tag on everything.
Yes. Second, they estimate the potential financial losses per specific security risk. Third, they have to estimate the mathematical likelihood of each type of risk or breach actually occurring. Fourth, they create a range of potential costs to the organization based on those combined estimates. And finally, management makes decisions about which countermeasures, policies, and procedures to fund based on that data.
It is a pure cost-benefit analysis. The text has a great analogy for this that strips away all the tech jargon.
I love this one.
It compares corporate cybersecurity to buying a burglar alarm for your personal house. You might know, logically, that a full, top-tier monitored alarm system with laser sensors prevents almost all burglaries.
Sure, it works perfectly.
But if that security system costs $50,000 to install and maintain, and the actual contents of your house are only worth $10,000, you aren't going to buy it.
Right, the math doesn't work.
It doesn't make financial sense to spend more on protection than the assets are worth. A small online shoe store has to evaluate if buying top-tier, enterprise-level digital security makes financial sense for their specific revenue model.
Exactly. If the cost of the security significantly outweighs the financial risk of the loss, businesses may intentionally choose not to implement every possible safeguard. They will actively decide to accept a certain level of risk because it makes financial sense.
Okay, let's explore the regulatory tension here. Because if a massive retailer runs that PML math, they might realize they have a vulnerability in their payment gateway. But when they run the numbers, they conclude that it is literally cheaper to let hackers eventually steal some credit card data, pay the inevitable regulatory fines, and offer customers free credit monitoring rather than paying $50 million to completely overhaul their legacy IT systems.
It sounds cynical, but it happens.
From a pure spreadsheet perspective, accepting the breach is cheaper. How do regulations change that math?
That tension is exactly why regulations exist. Historically, some companies did make that exact calculation because the regulatory fines were merely a cost of doing business. But regulations like the GDPR were designed specifically to disrupt that cost-benefit analysis.
How do they do that?
The GDPR introduces massive, punitive fines for negligence, sometimes scaling up to a percentage of a company's total global revenue.
Oh, wow. So not a flat fee.
No, a massive percentage. Suddenly, the probable maximum loss isn't just the cost of credit monitoring, it's a fine that could bankrupt the company. By artificially raising the financial risk of a breach, the regulation forces the PML math to favor implementing the expensive security measures. The law changes the financial equation to protect the consumer.
That makes perfect sense. The regulation turns a security vulnerability into an existential financial threat. So, assuming the math dictates that a company does need to invest in security, how do they go about it systematically? You don't just hand the IT guy a blank check.
Definitely not.
The text provides several frameworks for defense, starting with the Plan, Protect, Respond cycle.
The Plan, Protect, Respond cycle is a foundational methodology for dealing with security incidents. Phase 1 is the plan phase. An organization prepares for threats by comprehensively assessing its current security posture, understanding what threats are most likely given their industry, and identifying current vulnerabilities. It lays the strategic groundwork.
Okay, and Phase 2?
Phase 2 is Protect. This phase outlines and implements suitable safeguards to limit the impact of an event. It includes awareness training for all employees, robust identity management, physical access controls to server rooms, and formal IT security policies.
And Phase 3 is Respond.
Right. This outlines the specific practiced activities to execute when an incident is inevitably detected. It involves detailed response planning, managing communications with internal staff and external stakeholders, analyzing the technical impact, executing rapid mitigation activities to stop the spread of the malware, and conducting a rigorous post-event analysis to integrate lessons learned back into the plan phase.
And drilling down into even more operational detail, we have the NIST cybersecurity framework. We mentioned NIST earlier regarding definitions, but they provide an entire strategic architecture.
They do. The National Institute of Standards and Technology framework is voluntary guidance based on existing standards, guidelines, and practices. It is designed to help organizations manage cybersecurity risks systematically and foster clear communication among internal and external stakeholders.
And it has 5 parts, right?
Yes. It is structured around 5 core functions: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover.
Let's walk through how a company actually applies those 5 functions rather than just listing them. How does a company use the identify function?
The identify function forces organizations to develop a deep organizational understanding of their risk. You can't protect what you don't know you have, so a company has to conduct exhaustive asset management, cataloging every laptop, server, and database.
So literally making a list of everything.
Exactly. They have to understand their specific business environment and the laws that govern it, establish governance policies, and develop a comprehensive risk management strategy. It's about knowing your digital footprint intimately.
Once they know what they have, they move to the protect function.
The protect function presents the construct for implementing safeguards to ensure the continuous delivery of critical infrastructure services. This involves analyzing the identified risks, limiting secure access to physical systems and digital assets through access control, creating robust policies to prevent unauthorized access, conducting continuous awareness training, and deploying protective technology.
The third function is detect. And this seems critical because, as we discussed with the Under Armour breach, it took them a month to discover the hackers were inside.
Exactly. The detect function focuses entirely on the timely discovery of cybersecurity events. Advanced hackers don't just smash and grab. They often establish a quiet presence and launch attacks that go undetected for weeks or months to siphon data slowly.
So how does detect stop that?
The detect function aims to stop that through continuous monitoring of systems, rigorous analysis of network anomalies, and establishing automated processes to detect malicious events in real time.
The fourth function is respond.
When an anomaly is detected, the respond function establishes the exact procedures to take action. It dictates response planning, how to manage communications about the issue to avoid PR disasters, how to conduct forensic analysis of the issue, and most importantly, how to execute mitigation strategies to isolate the infected systems immediately.
And finally, the recover function.
The recover function is the organization's ability to restore any capabilities or services that were impaired due to the event. It dictates recovery planning for system restoration, like accessing off-site backups, implementing improvements to security measures based on the vulnerability that was exploited, and managing ongoing communications with stakeholders about the remediation efforts.
Let me play devil's advocate here. If the NIST framework is, as the text states, voluntary guidance, why would a lean, fast-moving small startup bother with all 5 incredibly detailed, time-consuming steps? Wouldn't a startup just buy a really good firewall and an intrusion prevention system and call it a day?
Buying a firewall is a tactic, right? NIST is a comprehensive strategy. Let's look at those tactical measures for a second. Management can deploy firewalls, which act as a barrier to control incoming and outgoing network traffic based on predetermined security rules.
Right.
They can deploy intrusion detection systems, or IDS, which passively monitor networks for malicious activity and generate alerts. And they can use intrusion prevention systems, IPS, which actively block and terminate detected threats. Plus, they can implement multi-factor authentication.
So why isn't that enough?
Because a startup might buy all those tools. But what happens when a new zero-day threat gets past the firewall and the IPS? If the startup only focused on the protect phase and ignored the NIST recover framework, they have no backups, no communication plan, and no way to restore operations. The business simply halts and dies. You need the full strategic cycle, not just the tactical tools.
That makes perfect sense. And part of that strategy involves creating a comprehensive cybersecurity plan. The text outlines a rigorous multi-step process for this, but essentially it boils down to assessing the landscape, defining your goals, identifying your specific IT defenses, creating response plans, addressing legal compliance, training your personnel, and continuously monitoring the environment. It's a massive operational undertaking.
It is. And a major component of executing that plan is acquiring the right software to protect your digital assets. The text provides a process for the acquisition and implementation of cybersecurity software. You don't just buy the first antivirus you see.
So what's the process?
You have to conduct a deep needs assessment to understand your unique architecture. You have to run a strict budget and cost analysis based on that probable maximum loss math. Then you research commercially available versus open source options, thoroughly evaluate vendors for their ability to customize the software, and finally, plan for deployment and continuous maintenance, because software is useless if it isn't constantly updated with the latest threat definitions.
We are rounding the corner into our final discussion area, because the landscape we just described is always shifting. The text highlights several emerging trends that future managers need to anticipate. Let's start with supply chain attacks.
Also known as value chain or third-party attacks, supply chain attacks occur when a malicious entity infiltrates a primary target's IT system through an outside partner or provider who has trusted access. This could be a software vendor, a managed service provider, or a network hardware provider. The attacker compromises the software or hardware components that are part of the larger supply chain.
Mechanically, what makes them so much more dangerous than a direct attack?
3 distinct characteristics make them devastating. First, third-party vulnerabilities. Attackers don't have to beat a massive corporation's billion-dollar security system. They just have to exploit the weaknesses in a smaller third-party component integrated into the target's environment.
Attacking the weak link.
Exactly. Second, stealth. They are incredibly difficult to detect because they exploit the existing, verified trust between a company and its suppliers. The malicious code is often disguised as a legitimate software update from a trusted vendor.
And the third characteristic?
Extensive impact. Because modern software supply chains are globally interconnected, compromising a single widely used software component can simultaneously infect thousands of organizations across multiple industries worldwide.
So, as a concrete scenario to visualize this, a large enterprise company, maybe a global logistics firm, secures its own internal network perfectly. They do the NIST framework, they have CISOs, they have unlimited budgets, but they use a small third-party vendor for their employee payroll software. A hacker breaches that small payroll vendor because the massive enterprise inherently trusts the data coming from the payroll vendor's servers. The hacker rides that trusted connection straight through the enterprise's defenses, gaining backdoor access to the main organization.
Yes.
As a manager, you are literally only as secure as the weakest vendor in your network.
Precisely. It completely changes how organizations must audit their partners. Another major structural trend is the shift toward hybrid environments. These are IT infrastructures that combine public cloud-based services with private on-premises computing resources.
Why do organizations go through the headache of managing a hybrid environment instead of just picking one, either putting everything in the cloud or keeping everything in their own server room?
It's about optimizing benefits and mitigating risk. Organizations want the incredible flexibility and scalability of cloud computing. The cloud allows them to easily scale server resources up or down to meet sudden demand without buying physical hardware, and they can choose where to focus specific computing workloads globally.
But they still want control.
Right. They combine that with on-premises resources to maintain absolute control and security over their most critical proprietary data, often to meet strict data residency laws and compliance requirements. Blending both gives them the agility of the cloud with the fortress-like control of an on-premise data center.
Then we have trends in identity verification. We mentioned basic authentication earlier, but the methods are getting much stricter as passwords become obsolete.
Yes, the traditional password is no longer sufficient. To defend against unauthorized access, common methods now include two-factor identification, or 2FA, which requires two separate forms of verification before granting access.
Right. And knowledge-based authentication.
Yes, KBA, requiring users to answer specific prearranged security questions. Then there is multi-factor authentication, MFA, which is the gold standard. It requires two or more verification factors, often combining something you know, like a password, with something you have, like a rotating security token generated on your smartphone app, or something you are, like a biometric scan.
And token-based authentication.
Using physical USB keys or digital tokens for verified access, the overarching trend across all industries is moving heavily toward these identity-first approaches.
And finally, we have to talk about the massive elephant in the room regarding emerging trends. Generative AI.
Oh, yes.
The text notes that Gen AI offers incredible tools for both sides of the cybersecurity war. On the defensive side, it offers productivity gains and better monitoring for threats. And AI can be trained on massive data sets to identify network anomalies and predict future threats far faster than a human analyst.
Yes. On the positive side, Gen AI is revolutionizing defense. It can instantly analyze millions of log entries to find the one anomaly that indicates a breach. It can also be used to create highly realistic and continuously updated training simulations.
For employees.
Yeah, it generates phishing scenarios that flawlessly imitate the latest cybercriminal techniques, helping internal teams develop the skills to adapt and respond to real-world threats effectively.
But the text also warns that cybercriminals are using Gen AI maliciously. They use it to write flawless, highly persuasive phishing emails in multiple languages, or to develop dynamic malware that automatically alters its own code to elude those very same cybersecurity countermeasures.
It's a real problem.
Let me speculate here for a second. It sounds like we are just entering a hyper-fast, automated arms race where the company's defensive AI is constantly fighting the hacker's offensive AI at lightning speed. And if so, where does the human business manager even fit into that equation?
That is the defining question for the next decade of business management. Yes, it is an automated arms race. But the human manager fits in by providing context and strategic direction. The AI can fight the tactical battle, blocking IP addresses and quarantining files, but the human must oversee the business war.
Because AI doesn't understand the big picture.
Exactly. The manager defines the overall security strategy, manages the budget, navigates the legal compliance, fosters the culture of verification among the human employees, and ultimately makes the hard risk management decisions based on probable maximum loss. AI doesn't understand business risk or brand reputation. Only a human manager can weigh those factors.
Okay, let's step back. We just covered a massive amount of incredibly complex information.
We did, but it's essential material. The cyber landscape we just described sounds absolutely terrifying, with double extortion ransomware, state-sponsored grid hacks, supply chain infiltrations, and AI-driven automated exploits.
Very terrible.
But understanding the mechanics of these concepts is exactly what empowers business professionals. You cannot protect your company's most valuable assets if you don't know the vocabulary, the threats, and the frameworks used to defend them.
I completely agree. Knowledge is the ultimate armor. We want to thank you, our listeners, so much for joining us on this extensive deep dive into Module 5 cybersecurity. We hope dissecting these concepts gives you the analytical edge you need in your studies at Tarleton State and in your future careers as business leaders.
We really appreciate you spending this time with us and engaging with the material so deeply.
If you found today's session valuable, please like, subscribe, follow, and share this deep dive with your peers. Most importantly, we want to hear from you in the comments below, because we are really curious how you would apply this. Drop a comment to share your thoughts on our discussion question for this module.
Here is what we want you to think about. Consider the risk analysis and probable maximum loss concepts we discussed today. Select a business you know well. It could be a local coffee shop you frequent, or a massive global retailer where you shop online. Based on what you believe their specific digital assets are worth, what specific cybersecurity measure, like implementing MFA, investing in a robust firewall, or intensive employee training against social engineering, do you think would give them the absolute highest return on their security investment, and why? Let us know in the comments.
We can't wait to read your analyses and see how you apply these frameworks. And before we go, here's a quick sneak peek of what is coming up next. Next time on Managing the Future, we are taking a look under the hood of the Internet itself.
That's going to be a good one.
In Module 6, Computer Networks and the Internet, we'll explore the invisible web of infrastructure and protocols that allows all this data to travel across the globe in milliseconds. You won't want to miss it.
It's going to be a fascinating exploration of the technology that connects us all.
Until next time, remember our opening scenario. That stolen laptop in the car. It doesn't have to be the end of your business, as long as you have the right strategy, the right culture, and the right framework in place to protect the data inside it. Stay secure, stay curious, and we will see you next time.